Good evening, everybody. My name is Eddie Reichman. Welcome to our lecture on the history of anti-Semitism in medical education. Most of you here, I assume, are in the medical field or medically related field. And it is no exaggeration that since October 7th, all of us in varying degrees have experienced more anti-Semitism in our medical environment than ever before. The objective of this lecture is to provide a little historical context. It is in fact we, in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, who have largely experienced a honeymoon or respite from anti-Semitism. It may not have disappeared, but it was in the background, sometimes distant background, at least before October 7th. In fact, for the most of the history of academic medical education, anti-Semitism in some form or another has been firmly in the foreground. And this evening, we will prove that with our presentation. Anti-Semitism in medical education, not exactly a new problem. This evening, what I'd like to do is spend very little time on anti-Semitism on university campuses since October 7th, 2023. Just want to clarify that you can see the presentation. Can everybody see the presentation? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, excellent. Yes. Thank you so much. And spend the lion's share of our presentation this evening on anti-Semitism and tolerance as well on university campuses as far back as the founding of universities. And our focus this evening is really on medical education. Anti-Semitism on university campuses since October 7th, 2023. I needn't remind all of you, we have all experienced this in real time. The current climate on campus reveals massive rise in anti-Semitic incidents, security concerns with Jews hiding their Jewishness, hostile environment on campus, causing stress and depression for our students, faculty supporting anti-Semitic causes, and administration not supporting our Jewish students. This has, of course, spilled over into medical education, into medical schools. My objective this evening is not to discuss the current climate. That is something that many of you are intimately familiar with from personal experience and others are discussing, but it is being addressed. And here is just an array of conferences and lectures addressing the current anti-Semitism. In Ontario, a survey revealed that 94% of Jewish doctors surveyed feel anti-Semitism has impacted the educational environment. Anti-Semitism in medicine, an international perspective, is a list of clinicians from across the globe sharing their personal experiences with anti-Semitism. And it's reached such an extent that anti-Semitism and Free Palestine has even infiltrated medical school graduations, commencements, which is addressed here in this article from the Rambam Maimonides Medical Journal. The Department of Health and Human Services feels it's so important that they need to act to combat anti-Semitism, and a recent article in the Journal of Religion and Health, social media survey, and medical literature data reveal escalating anti-Semitism within the United States healthcare community. It has led to the founding of a brand new organization, the American Jewish Medical Association. Formed in the wake of October 7th, 2023, the AJMA, and I don't know if any of the members of the AJMA are on this Zoom. If you are, kudos to you, kol hakavod for the extraordinary work that you are doing, is a non-political, non-profit organization of Jewish healthcare professionals with the mission to build an empowered community of Jewish healthcare professionals committed to combating discrimination and anti-Semitism by promoting merit and excellence. We advocate to address contemporary issues affecting our members and society, including recently rising incidents of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, that impact the workplace and patient care. What I'd like to do for the rest of our session this evening is to discuss anti-Semitism on campuses of the university since the very founding of universities, a tale of exclusion with a small dose of tolerance. The very first university is generally considered to be Bologna, established in 1088. And here on the left side of your slide, you see a list of some of the open universities started later. Harvard, one of our oldest universities, started 1636, Yale 1700, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, Columbia, Brown, Dartmouth, all in the 1700s. If you were a Jew studying at university in the pre-modern era,
I'll give you 2 kinds of sugar.
What would you be studying? So today, the kind of courses you could take, and you know that I'm not joking about these things.
The science of Star Trek.
Include the physics of Star Trek. These are all at real universities. How to watch television, Montclair, Lady Gaga and the sociology of fame, tree climbing, zombies and popular culture. What would you have studied if you were in university in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance? So since these were universities under Catholic religious auspices.
Zombies.
Yeah, I heard.
Colombian.
It's retarded. That's Colombian. Lady Gaga. Many of these doctors are making aliyah.
Betty, Hannah is Hannah Littman from the old days at Einstein. If you want to make me co-host, I'll mute people.
Oh, you are the best. Thanks, Hannah. Let me see if I can find you here.
I'm one named.
What's going on?
I'm trying to find Hannah so she can meet. I think we may have done it. I think I may have done it. I don't hear anybody anymore. Right? Nope. Are we good, folks? Oh, there you are, Hannah. Okay, I'm going to make you co-host. Okay, I just made you co-host, Hannah. Thanks for saving the day.
Do my best.
What would you be studying in the university of the pre-modern era? So there's only a few major courses that one would be taking in these universities. These universities like Bologna, like the University of Siena, like the University of Padua. And the majors included theology, philosophy, canon law, which is ecclesiastical law or religious law, civil law, and medicine. Of all of these subjects, theology a Jew would never study. Philosophy they couldn't study because that was religiously based. Canon law was ecclesiastical, so surely they couldn't study. Civil law was not studied because Jews could not become lawyers at that particular time. So there's only one single subject that a Jew could study at university in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and that was medicine. Thus, the history of the Jews in the university entirely in the Middle Ages and Renaissance is essentially the history of medical training. That's the only reason Jews would have wanted to attend a university in that period of time. However, even if a Jew would have wanted to attend university, they were not allowed to attend the universities. And going back to the Council of Basel and probably earlier, and this was declared in 1434, and I made a point to try and obtain some of the original documentation. This is from 1451 from the Bavarian State Library. This is the Decree for Jews and Neophytes, renewing the sacred canon. We prohibit in every way Jews and other infidels from having Christians, male or female, in their households, as nurses of their children, Christians joining them in festivals, marriages, banquets, etc., from taking them as doctors. Jewish doctors were not allowed to treat Christian patients. They should not be given public offices or admitted to any academic degrees. So in essence, Jews were barred from universities from the Middle Ages onwards. And there was decree after decree by the popes. This is a papal decree from 1555. This is a papal decree from 1584 from Pope Gregory XIII, for those of you who have expertise in papal history. So these papal edicts that were reinforced every single generation really prevented Jews from both treating Christians and from attending medical school. Here is a picture, actually, of myself with Rabbi Dr. Avram Steinberg. This is a tour I gave in the Osler Library in McGill University in Montreal, which is an exceptional collection of medical history. And it has one of the original papal bulls, as they're called. And the reason I'm standing standing next to Rabbi Dr. Avram Steinberg is also to give historical perspective, because we are standing in front of a papal bull preventing Jews from treating Christians and Jews from becoming doctors, etc. Yet in our generation, as you see here down on the bottom, Pope Francis names 2 rabbis to the Pontifical Academy of Life in historic first. One of those rabbis is, in fact, Rabbi Dr. Avram Steinberg, an icon in the field of Jewish medical ethics. So fortunately, many things have changed since those times. But despite these papal decrees, many people still use Jewish physicians. And in fact, the popes themselves retain Jewish physicians. Almost every single pope had a Jew retained on their staff. And there's some articles to that effect. The Pope's Jewish doctors from 492 to 1655, the Medicine Juif, the French, in a French journal, the Jewish physicians and the papacy, as did other members of the elite. And Raymond Lull in the 13th century complained bitterly that Jews are universally entrusted by the great with the care of their health, nor is the church free of this abomination. And comically, a 17th century French historian recorded that King Francis I sent to Spain asking of Charles V, a Jewish physician, for a malady of which the court physicians could not cure. Charles V couldn't find a Jew, so he sent him a converted Jew. But as soon as King Francis found out that this physician was converted, he didn't even let him examine him. He sent him away and sent for a true Jew to Constantinople, who ultimately cured him and restored his health. This I throw in here because it's just such a remarkable passage in this context of royalty and popes being treated by Jewish physicians. King Henry IV, whose reign covered the early 15th century, also requested a specific Jewish physician to treat him after his own physicians were not successful, and that physician lived in Italy. His name was Elias Sabato. Elias Sabato was a renowned physician in Italy, Jewish physician, treated popes in Italy, and it was requested by Henry IV to come join him in England to treat him. And in his request, he said, "I will be happy to accede to your request, Your Majesty, on the proviso that you provide me," and this is in Latin, this is the original Latin, "cum decim hominibus servientibus." Decim is 10, hominibus is men, 10 male servants to accompany me. Why do you think he wanted 10 male servants to accompany him? Because he needed a minion to daven. And was there no minion in England? So the answer is there indeed was no minion, at least of practicing or overtly practicing Jews in England, because the Jews had been banned from England centuries before. So this is quite an extraordinary document. But turning to some other extraordinary documents about the Jews in universities, here's some examples. This is University Statutes and Regulations from Portugal, and these are the original documents from Coimbra in Portugal in 1604. Those who wish to be admitted to the field of medicine must not be of Jewish race. Judea is here. New Christians nor Moors, nor descended from such people. And in fact, this declaration of Jews not being able to be admitted to universities is found in many universities throughout Europe. Germany was probably the greatest offender on this. There's an entire book, Medicine in the German Jews, an excellent book by John Ephron, where he talks about Jews, the Germans, were more egregious than others, and not our discussion today. But it gives important historical context to the events of the mid 20th century. Thanks to early modern polemical literature, an indelible image was created of the Jewish doctor as a murderously evil charlatan, a professional incompetent, an introducer of the devil to Germany, a vice-ridden, depraved criminal locked in a ruthless competition with German physicians. And that was the prevalent theme throughout all of the Middle Ages, Renaissance, straight through, undeterred, up through Nazi Germany in the 20th century, and it gives a little important context. Italy was a little different. Italy was more tolerant. Italy was one of the few places, even though there were parts of the different republics within what is now Italy, who did ban Jews. Generally, it was one of the areas where Jews were allowed to live, and they were definitely more permissive than other places in the world. And University of Sapienza, which is the University of Rome in 1676, pointed out, which was in fact the case, that Jews could attend, but only on the proviso. This entire chapter in their statutes is the Jew, refers to the Jew and how to treat the Jew. And in these statutes, it maintains that a Jew, in order to attend, needs explicitly papal permission. If a Hebrew, by the mandate of the Holy See, seeks either a degree of doctorate or licentiate, observing all other things that must be observed by Christians. So the only way any Jew could attend as a professing Jew, attend a university in Italy, was to literally get permission from the Pope himself. And you had to get someone to intercede on your behalf. And this was granted in numerous circumstances. At universities across Italy, there were not numerous Jews, but in less than 10 at the number of institutions, that the University of Siena, University of Bologna, University of Rome, like this. But even if they were allowed, in the statutes, it says, he shall pay to the chamberlain of the college 3 times that which is established for Christians, unless otherwise decided by a majority of the college members. So A, you needed papal permission. B, even if you did get in, your tuition was much higher. And Cecil Roth, who is the editor of the first edition of the Encyclopedia Judaica, in his article on the medieval university and the Jew, talks about the anti-Semitic practices for these few Jews who did attend some of these universities in Italy. And he said, indeed, there were some places where this traditional student activity developed into a university custom. In Italy, it was a universal student prerogative to bombard the Jews with snowballs on the occasion of the first snowfall of the year, a rite which was compounded at Turin, which is in northern Italy, by an annual payment of 25 ducats, which the Jewish community had to pay, the Jewish students, and at Mantua, by a heavy ransom of confectionery and writing paper. At Padua, besides paying a tribute of confetti on this occasion, meaning the first snowfall of the year, the Jews had to give a number of fat capons, or the equivalent, on St. Martin's Day. At Pisa, down to the beginning of the 19th century, it was customary for the students to weigh the fattest Jew they could find each year on the day of St. Catherine, and to exact his weight in sweetmeats from the rest of the community as a ransom. So these vile anti-Semitic practices continued despite the fact that Jews were allowed to some extent. And we did mention that the Jews were not allowed to treat Christians. That also sometimes could be altered if one received special papal permission to treat the Christian community. This is one such example. The very earliest diploma we have of any Jewish medical student. This is Avraham de Balmas, who actually authored a grammatical work called Mikne Avraham, graduated in the auspicious year of 1492 from the University of Naples. This is his actual diploma, which is still extant. And in the text of the diploma, it says that he is allowed to treat Christian students. When were Jews more formally or expansively allowed into the universities? So this is a superficial overview of when Jews were allowed to enter the universities. Italy was by far the earliest, and Padua, which we'll talk about in a little more detail, began allowing Jews to attend from the 1400s, even without papal permission, as we will see. The Netherlands, it took another few hundred years after Padua allowed students to attend until other countries and other universities allowed Jews. The Netherlands was not until the mid-1600s, Germany, Austria, the 1700s, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, not till the 1800s. I just want to spend a few moments on the University of Padua. The University of Padua was famously, in this period of time, the only university to officially, formally allow Jews to enter through the front door. And that was primarily because they were not part of the Papal States. They were part of the Venetian states. Even though they had anti-Semitic practices, which they maintained, they were much more welcoming, much more accepting, much more tolerant of the Jews. And lest you think that this was like a community college that was allowing the Jews to attend, here I share with you, some of the people who lectured at this university. Their names you might recognize: Nicholas Copernicus, Andreas Vesalius. For the women in the group, Gabrielle Fallopio of fallopian tube fame, Battista Morgani, the founder of modern pathology, one of the giants of medicine at that time, William Harvey, who discovered circulation, and Galileo. And they even have the Stender, or lectern, that Galileo used for his lectures at the University of Padua, if you visit. And they also have, by the way, the anatomical theater, which is the oldest continuously standing anatomical theater in the world, at the University of Padua, which was founded, unfortunate for Vesalius, a few years after his tenure. But Fallopius was able to benefit from that theater. Andreas Vesalius is the founder of anatomy. His work, the fabric of the human body in Latin, is one of the greats in history. Not for a discussion today, but there actually is Hebrew language as part of this fabrica for a peripheral reason not related to our discussion today. And here I show you to the right of this, one of the more extraordinary documents reflecting the Jewish experience at the University of Padua. This is the work of Andreas Vesalius in the Yiddish language, in a manuscript going back to the 1500s. So it's hard to tell if it's exactly contemporary with Vesalius or not, or shortly thereafter. But assuming it's contemporary with Vesalius, you can imagine Yankel and Yossi sitting in the back row. And I'll explain the reason why this was necessary is because not only did local Italians attend the University of Padua, and this is a very tolerant university, very different than other universities at this time, but students came from Germany, from France, from Poland. They literally came from the shtetl with no secular exposure whatsoever, zero. Walked into the university with Galileo teaching. So it was. So they needed to be acclimated at that time, and there were people who even dedicated their time to acclimating these students who came from these foreign countries who didn't speak the language, and this is a Yiddish version of Vesalius, which reflects that fascinating history. These Jewish students had interaction with extraordinary people. In fact, Galileo promoted the Jewish student for graduation, David Portaleone. David Portaleone's father is probably more famous than him, is a man by the name of Avraham Portaleone. Avraham Portaleone is the author of a work called Shiltei Giborim, which actually is not on medicine, but he was one of the most prominent physicians of his generation. And Yosef Shlomo del Medigo was a Ben Bayis at Galileo's home. And there's an article, The Paduan Rebbe, a note on Galileo's household and Mediterranean science in the 17th century, which details Galileo's relationship with another Jewish student from the University of Padua. Padua also is granted its diplomas to its Jewish medical students. Other universities did not allow them to graduate, even if they attended. If you look on the bottom right hand here, you will see the diploma of William Harvey. And in William Harvey's diploma, he graduated in 1602 from the University of Padua. The invocation is in Christe Nomine, in the name of Jesus, in the name of Yoshka, which would not have been amenable to a Jewish graduate. They would not have been happy taking home. And I always joke that a Jewish mother paying perhaps 2 or 3 times regular tuition for their son to attend the University of Padua would not be happy if they came home with a diploma that said in Christe Nomine. So I suspect, this is my theory, I haven't proven it, that one of the mothers of the students went into the office and said, listen, I'm paying you guys a lot of money. The least you could do is change this invocation. And in fact, in the Jewish diplomas, time for another discussion, this is something that I've spent years tracking down, the all extant diplomas from the University of Padua, which is another fascinating history, but they did alter that invocation in Dei Eterne Nomine, Amen, in the name of the eternal God, so de-Christianizing it, so to speak. And here you have something even more remarkable. This graduate is Gershon Tilke, a graduate of the 1680s. Some of these had diplomas, had portraits in the diplomas. This is a frum student, Gershon Tilke. This is not Moshe Rabbeinu. It looks like Moshe Rabbeinu. It's actually Hippocrates up on the right over there. But these little putti, or angels, depict the graduation ceremony of the University of Padua. This was part of all graduations of major universities in this period of time. They would place a wreath on the head of the graduate, a ring on the finger of the graduate, a book. The little putti was holding the book. They would open and close books to reflect the transmission of knowledge. And this black hat was not inserted by art scroll. This black hat is a beretta, which is a distinct and distinguished hat, which is granted to the Jewish graduate. By the way, in terms of anti-Semitism also, Jews were not allowed to wear these kinds of hats. Jews had to wear distinct colored hats to identify them as Jews, all Jews, not just medical Jews, and they were usually different colors. Sometimes they were red, sometimes they were yellow. So doctors, actually graduates specifically of the University of Padua, maintained that they should be exempt and be allowed to wear this black beretta, these black hats. The other fascinating aspect of the University of Padua is poetry was composed to celebrate the graduation of these students. Poetry is composed for lots of different things, but in particular for the graduates of the University of Padua. And I've uncovered hundreds of these, not hundreds, but a little over 100, about 106, 107 poems for multiple different graduates. The author of this poem you may recognize, Moshe Chaim ben Yaakov Chai Lutzato. That's the Ramchal. The Ramchal lived in Padua, was very close with the students of the University of Padua. Again, a topic for another conversation. But just for your interest, there has long been debate whether the Ramchal himself, the author of the famous Musar works, attended the University of Padua Medical School, and Deborah Glassberg Gale wrote her dissertation on a graduate of the University of Padua, Yitzhak Lampranti, and in a footnote, she mentioned that he is found in the archives as matriculating. And I contacted my dear friend Francesco Piovan, who's the archivist at the University of Padua, and he sent me the original matriculation records from 1723, 1725, 1726. And you see M-O-I-S-E, that's Moshe, Vita, which is Chaim, Lutzato, L-U-Z-Z-A-T-T, or T-O, D, son of Jacob Ibreo. So these are records of the Ramchal attending. I mentioned that while there was much tolerance for, even since the 1400s, 1500s in Padua, it wasn't until the 1600s that universities in the Netherlands began attending. And I share with you the very first student to ever graduate the University of Leiden. And the University of Leiden in the Netherlands was one of the greatest universities of medicine at that period of time, in the 1600s and the 1700s. The very first Jew to matriculate and subsequently graduate was a Jew by the name of David DeHaro. This is his original matriculation record from February 1629, and he was called Judaeus, much like Jews in Italy were called Hebreo or Hebreus. It is not clear and does not seem to be uniquely anti-Semitic that they were labeled as such. Others also were labeled by their country of origin and sometimes by their religion. So this particular identification as Judaeus wasn't necessarily anti-Semitic. This is one of DeHaro's dissertations that he wrote in the course of medical school. And I actually found, remarkably, a letter of recommendation from one of DeHaro's professors recommending that he be promoted within the medical school towards graduation. And I'll translate some of that letter for you in the next slide. This letter is held in the University of Cambridge today. And the professor was a professor of philosophy who wrote the letter on his behalf. Philosophy was an integral part of medical training in those days. And he wrote to Vorstius. Vorstius was responsible for promoting students to graduation. And he said, I am the translation of the letter, or part of the letter. I am recommending David DeHaro, an accomplished young man, to you. And he writes, if I cannot love his religion, inasmuch as it departs from Christianity, I still approve of his modesty, and I thought that it should not be despised all the more so. And he says, and so I would like you, now that I have asked, not to see it as a burden, to help him with the favor if he has need. So this is we all get letters of recommendation to advance through college, through medical school. So this is a letter of recommendation for the very first Jewish student to graduate the University of Leiden, and his religion is mentioned in the context of that of this letter of recommendation. What's fascinating is that just a few days before the graduation of DeHaro, he graduated on March 5th, 1633. You find this entry in the university archives of the University of Leiden, and it writes about a Jew who wants to be promoted publicly. But when those who are raised thus conceive prayers to God, the question was whether it was lawful for Christians to associate their prayers with the prayers of the Jews, because they do not acknowledge their Savior. It was thought that he should not be promoted publicly but privately, and an oath to be given to him. It was agreed that the whole thing should be done as such in the future. This is a record from March 5th, 1633, the Senate of Leiden discussing how to deal with the very first Jewish graduate that they have ever had in the university. And David DeHaro went through this graduation. Just a few years later, another student at the University of Leiden got in trouble with the university for his Jewishness. And that was a graduate by the name of Philip Levy. And at the end of his dissertation, a copy of which you see here, I believe this is the only existing copy, and it's found in the University of Sheffield. I have not identified anywhere else in the world where a copy is to be found. There's no copy even in the Netherlands. And he wrote at the end of this copy in the Hebrew script, and it was not uncommon for dissertations to have Hebrew script, because this was also a time of Christian Hebraists, where the Christians themselves knew Hebrew and were interested in Hebrew, and we'll discuss that in just a moment. But he wrote, Baruch Hashem, thank God, Asher lo azav chasto mimeni, who has not relinquished or minimized his kindness towards me, and Asam lichein v'chesed, and has bestowed upon me the kindness and wisdom to learn Chachmas HaRefuah. And he writes, "Akavel Hashem sheitein li bracha v'tzlacha," I should have blessing and success. V'kabetz nidchei Yisrael, and the people of Israel should be gathered from the four corners of the earth, and we said, Mashiach should come speedily in our days. And this is the end of his dissertation. The university was not so happy with that, and they censured him. And this is the original university entry from the Senate minutes on June 5th, 1684, and this is the translation. The Senate wrote, he concluded his discussion with a Hebrew prayer. We have found fault, and by the Senate made a decree. We caution the Jews of Amsterdam If they desired to be promoted in the academy, University of Leiden, they should not do this. Students should abstain from this kind of statement. But nonetheless, it's followed by the fact that he graduated with the highest honors, and he was obviously a bright student. Just to share with you also the relationship of Jewish students throughout the centuries with greats in the history of medicine. This Jewish student, Moses Leo, about a century later in the University of Leiden, was a Talmud, a student of Boerhaave, Hermann Boerhaave. You may be familiar with Boerhaave's syndrome, which is a rupture of the esophagus, one of the giants in the field of medicine during his time. The very first graduate, so we said Germany did not begin to allow students till the 1700s. University of Göttingen, which is a very famous university at that time, only started in the early 1730s. This is the very first Jewish graduate from the University of Göttingen. This is Lehman Isaac Cohen. This is his original matriculation record from October 7th, 1736. It is remarkable how I was able to find his extant dissertations. I have 4 dissertations from him during his medical school training, which I haven't found for any other student in that period, not even close. So he wrote multiple dissertations, and these were public defenses and dissertations. This was his final dissertation. The person he presented his final dissertation to was a man by the name of Albrecht Haller. Albrecht Haller was the rector, or the chancellor of the University of Göttingen. He was also one of the greatest scientists of his age. He's considered the father of modern physiology. So he gave a faher. He tested for his graduation. He tested Lehman Isaac Cohen. And what's remarkable is that Cohen was the very first graduate from this university who was Jewish. And Albrecht Haller, in the dissertation, and the dissertation records what Albrecht Haller said at that period of time. So there was a small gathering, I'm sure, but that gathering was recorded for posterity. And Albrecht Haller wrote, "There is no reason why we should linger over the customs of his race or disagreements in religion, because until that point, Germany was not allowing any Jews to attend any university in Germany." But he comments, Padua opened seats to men of a different faith, which we know they did hundreds of years earlier, and so does Leiden. Leiden was one of the greatest institutions at that time. So they were following the lead of Padua and the lead of Leiden, Leiden, the mother of medical institutions, and we do so as well, with the intention of giving the highest honors in the art of medicine, if he may deserve it. This other student from the University of Göttingen graduated with a dissertation on medicine in the Talmud. And this is a student by the name of Benjamin Wolf Ginsberger. This very student, I forgot to include it in the slide, sent a tshuva to Yaakov Emden about whether autopsy would be permitted on Shabbos, which is part of the halachic literature. In terms of timing, I'm probably going to finish, and obviously everyone needs to leave. They can leave. I'm probably going to finish about 9:45, 9:50. Feel free to come and go as you wish. The University of Heidelberg was one of another university in Germany. Less students attended that than the University of Göttingen and the University of Halle, which is also attended by many Jews. And you have a record of anti-Semitism in the matriculation record of the university from 1730. So this student, Judah Capilla Pictor, Judaeus, was a Jewish student. Franciscus Kern was a non-Jewish student, and Judah Capilla Pictor, in the printed edition of this matriculation record, follows Franciscus right after him, and it looks like that's the way it was in the original matriculation record. But if you look in the manuscript matriculation record, you see the name Francis Kern, Heidelbergensis, which means from the city of Heidelberg, and then you have a little note that says, "Turn to the end of the book." and you do not see Judah Capilla Pictor's name. Why do you not see his name? Because his name is at the very end of the volume, because Jewish students were not included in the matriculation list with the other students. They were placed in the very back of the volume. So this is the volume of students from 1704 to 1810. All the Jewish students were placed on the last page. Can you guys see my my arrow? You don't see my arrow. When I move my arrow,
We do.
you do. Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. So this is Judah Capilla Pictor. This is one of the Jewish students. All these students were Jewish. And if you look on here, this bracket, and this word, which I pulled out and turned 45 degrees, is Judaeus. These are all Jews. So all the Jews were pushed to the very back of the volume. They weren't dignified to be included in the matriculation record alongside the other non-Jewish students. His father was of the older generation who still went to the University of Padua before Germany became available for Jewish students, and this is his father's diploma, again with the alteration in the headline in Dei Eternae Nomine instead of in Christe Nomine. There are two students who tried to attend a German university before the 1700s, and they are actually quite famous in Jewish medical history. One is Tuvia Harofe, who's one of the more famous graduates of the University of Padua, wrote a book called Ma'aseh Tuvia, which is one of the most famous works in Jewish medical history, and Gabriel Felix. They were both Polish students and went to yeshiva. And Tuvia's father was a big Talmid Chacham and wrote Sfarim, and they wanted to attend the University of Frankfurt in Germany in 1678. And this is Tuvia's application, so to speak, for admission, because no Jews had ever attended any university in Germany before that point. So he wrote to the Duke, and it's actually on this page here. He wrote, I'll show you the Hebrew, I'll show you something interesting about the Hebrew. He wrote a Hebrew poem to Duke Friedrich Wilhelm, petitioning him to attend the University of Frankfurt. A magnificent poem, and if you look at the poem, you'll see that the acronym spells out Friedrich Wilhelm over here, Hadukas Hagadol V'Hamiyuchas, the Grand Duke, and this is the Duke's wife, Dorothea, was Friedrich Wilhelm's wife, and this is Tuvia's name, Tuvia, and backwards Tuvia HaKohen. We can talk at another time how he could attend medical school and do anatomy class as a Kohen. That's for another discussion. But he wrote a Hebrew poem. Now, why on earth is he writing a Hebrew poem to try and get into a medical school in Germany? The answer is they were interested in Hebrew at that time, and this was a bonus for his application. And he even wrote in that poem that he would agree l'tovat habachurim harotzim lahasig lashon ha'ivriim l'kol echad kirtzon libo yilamedu hetev lashon. Said, I, Tuvia, will teach anyone in your university who wants to learn the Hebrew language. I will teach them the Hebrew language. And in fact, he was accepted, and this is the original decree, the original decree from Friedrich Wilhelm, which is from the Staatsarchive in Berlin. And he and his friend Gabriel Moshewitz, Moshewitz means son of Moshe, and Tobias Moshewitz, son of Moshe, also son of Moshe, both Jews from Poland, having approached us. They declare they wish to set forth a study of medicine at our university and to go learn German as well, and in return are willing to teach Hebrew to those who desire to learn it, and at the same time requested that they may enjoy privilege here like other students. And as a token, once they were officially accepted, they actually compiled this extraordinary grammar tree. This schematic is a schematic of the totality of Hebrew grammar. with all the different tenses. And it's obviously in a little bit of micrography. You'd have to look at it up close. And it's for the gratitude for being accepted to the University of Frankfurt. And on the bottom of that beautiful broadside over here, actually in the very bottom, is in Hebrew. Up top is in Latin. They both say the same thing. Tavlo zos machzekes betocha kitzur diktuk is a grammar tree. Dugmat ilan, in the shape of a tree. Hikravnu ladunenu, we present it to our great Dukas Hagadol in appreciation. And it says, Lihios lezikaron olam, it should be a lasting memory, an eternal memory. Toch biblioteca shalo, to be housed in his library. Because Duke Friedrich Wilhelm prized his library, and they say and they signed Tuvia Rofe from Zelkvi and Gabriel Felix. And what's fascinating is that it still to this very day is in the Bibliothek of Berlin all these centuries later. Judah Gonzago had difficulty. He did not attend the University of Padua. He attended Rome, and he didn't have the luxury that the Padua University students had. So in his biography, he wrote, and this is a translation of his biography, said, first it was necessary to obtain papal permission, which we had mentioned. This was secured through the exercise of considerable friendly influence. One of the teachers whose lectures he was unable to attend because they were given on the Shabbos gave him special help. However, when the time came for examinations, the matter of the fees became serious. And this is what we had mentioned before. The fee of 30 scudi was for Christian students, but remember, Jews had to pay 3 times as much. So it was 90 for Jewish students. It was difficult to obtain the abatement. He was obliged to visit each of the 13 examiners and plead his cause. So he had to take an exam with each one, an oral exam with each one. One of them candidly told him that the request would not be granted because the faculty had a year before passed 2 Jewish candidates. There was therefore no need for another. And he also shares his experience with exams during the Yomim Tovim and during the Yomim Noraim, during the high holidays. He said he passed very satisfactory examinations before each of the examiners. The last examination was held on the day of the Jewish New Year, on Rosh Hashanah. He tells how he attended the early service, left the synagogue after Shachris, went before the examiners, passed through the ordeal, and returned to shul in time just to hear the shofar. Having fulfilled all requirements, he was ready to receive his degree. We also have a remarkable letter exchange in the early 1700s between 2 German students who were both the only Jew at their respective universities. Shmuel Shimon, who was in Frankfurt on Oder, which is the same university that Tuvia and Gabriel applied to in 1678. By the way, the postscript for Tuvia and Gabriel is that there was so much anti-Semitism, and they tried so hard to convert them, that they actually left the university after a year, and they went to the University of Padua, which is much more tolerant, and they ended up graduating from the University of Padua. But here, this is decades later, this student, Shmuel Shimon, wrote, he found out that there was another student in the University of Halle who was also the only Jewish student in that university. And Shmuel Shimon had a terrible experience in the University of Frankfurt, and he was very despondent and very lonely. So he wrote this letter, and he said that he requested from Wallach to join him in Frankfurt. My request from God is that he should find me someone of the Jewish faith of similar interests, with whom I could learn both Torah and the sciences together. Come join me, so that we will be a nation together by ourselves and need not mix or interact with others. What was the response of Wallach, of Yitzchak Isaac Wallach, to this letter of pleading for companionship? So he said, your experience is very bad, but I'm here at the University of Halle. I'm having a great experience. They are very tolerant of me, or more tolerant of me. He even mentioned that they allowed him to carry a sword in public, which for a Jew was a very big deal. And he also mentioned that he was a Talmid Muvhak, a very close student of Professor Friedrich Hoffmann, who was also one of the giants of medicine at that time. So he was having a wonderful experience. He was a brilliant fellow, this Yitzchak Isaac Wallach. He got smicha, wrote Sfarim, and his manuscript of some of his works was recently auctioned off. Moving into the 19th and 20th centuries, we bring our presentation to a close. In the late 1800s and 1900s, things started to change. Jews were allowed to attend universities to some extent, but what happened is, in the late 1800s, the population of Jews changed radically in some of these European countries, and also, as we'll see, in America as well. Let's see, it says here, the most prominent group were Jews. Among the numerous immigrants flocking to the capital from all corners of the empire in search of work and education, or the group of Jews whose share in, this is talking about Vienna, by the way, whose share in the Viennese population increased from 6% in 1869 to 12% in 1890. While new immigrants engaged in trade or business, the second generation of these Jewish immigrants chose the route to integration that went through the university, with medicine being one of the most popular choices. And by the early 1880s, around 55% of medical students in Vienna were Jewish. And what happened both in Vienna and when there was migration here in New York as well, as we'll talk about in a moment, is that there was a pushback from these universities about the influx of these Jewish students. And here you have in another part of the world, this is published in the Lancet, which is still being published to this very day. This is from 1884. On the proposal of Professor Erhardt, the Council of the University of Kiev has limited the number of Jewish medical students to 10% of the class. University of Vienna in the late 1800s, one of its professors was Theodor Billroth. Now, those of you who are in the medical field, and those of you certainly who are in the surgical field, will be familiar with the Billroth procedure. This is Billroth 1, not Billroth 2. And Billroth wrote a work about the German universities. In that work, he has some virulently anti-Semitic passages. And it caused a tremendous stir, and many have written about this. But it's just interesting for you to be aware of it. It said, such empty-headed strivers with their purblind eyes, hands like lead, brains like clay, dictionary knowledge and pathetic incompetence are to be found in large numbers, especially among those poor medical students. They often understand so little German that they can grasp neither the language nor the sense of the questions, and are quite incapable of expressing their thoughts either in German or any other tongue for that matter. What happened in the United States is there was also a tremendous amount of students, Jews, that came to New York especially, and came to the United States in late 1800s, early 1900s, and that ultimately led to the development of quotas here. So this is the rise and decline of the Jewish quota in the medical school admissions. You're all familiar with this, some of you more intimately perhaps than others. But what in essence happened is, if you look at these statistics, Jews sought to become physicians in far greater proportion than did other segments of the American population after 1880. In 10 major cities surveyed over 5-year periods, the number of Jewish physicians graduated had increased from 7 in 1875 to 1880 to 2,313 in the years 1931 to 1935. The secretary of the Association of American Medical Colleges in 1934 found that more than 60% of the 33,000 applications on file were from Jews. So what happened is universities had to find a way to limit the number of Jews, because their sole criterion for acceptance was academic qualifications and intelligence. And based on those criteria alone, Jews were getting in very high numbers. So they had to figure out a way to decrease those numbers. And the whole world of and it wasn't only in the field of medicine. It was universities across the board in the United States started creating these quotas. There's a wonderful podcast series called Gatecrashers about how Jews were treated in the Ivy Leagues, which I recommend for those of you who have any interest in this subject. Columbia University created a special college just to get rid of the Jews, to pawn off the Jews on this community college, to unload them from the main campus, which some of you may not be familiar with. It's called the Seth Low Community College. My wife Sarah is very fond of this little historical chapter, and it's little known. And the sole purpose of creating this college basically was to accept Jews, but not allow them to go to the main campus. They shunted them to this other campus. And one of those who was shunted to that campus was Isaac Asimov, who obviously became successful later in life. And what's remarkable, for those of you who are not familiar with this, and it's discussed in Gatecrashers and in this wonderful article in the Washington Post, is that many aspects of our university admissions today were initiated for the sole purpose of excluding Jewish students from universities. So that the concept of looking beyond grades, the holistic review, and looking at character, personality, extracurricular activities was basically instituted to exclude Jewish students who had excellent grades, excellent test scores, but didn't necessarily have extracurriculars. Legacy, the whole concept of legacy, was instituted to favor the alumni who were predominantly Protestant elite, and again, exclude the Jews. The concept of geographical diversity was introduced to go out into the Midwest and into the South and out into godforsaken places because no Jews were there. That way they could increase their population of non-Jews. And even the interview was initiated, associated with character assessments, because you couldn't necessarily tell always from the application if a student was Jewish. But if you interviewed them, you would be able to see that they possess Jewish characteristics and thereby eliminate them. And this led to the creation of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. This led to the creation of the concept of a Jewish hospital. Jewish hospitals were created not only to serve the indigent of the Jewish population, but because of anti-Semitism, because of quotas, the Jewish patients, the Jewish professionals didn't have a place to practice, and the Jewish patients weren't being treated properly. People couldn't get residencies, so the Jewish hospitals accommodated in graduate medical education, provided opportunities for Jewish doctors to train and practice because they were refused at other institutions. And why did the United States medical school admissions quota for the Jews end? And with this, we will end. It ended for the following reasons. It ended because after World War II, attitudes towards Jews shifted. As Americans recoiled from the horrors of the Holocaust, and over 500,000 Jewish GIs returned home from World War II, many of these GIs entered higher education. Government and private investigations in New York exposed the quotas finally. New York State established publicly supported non-discriminatory medical schools, so they couldn't have quotas. The federal and several state governments passed non-discrimination higher education legislation. The quotas ended because of a combination of changing societal attitudes and government and private social action. And we, all of us, are the beneficiary of the climate and the environment in the aftermath of this change. That's why we haven't experienced such tremendous anti-Semitism until October 7th. So that in a nutshell ends our discussion this evening. Well, it is the end of our discussion for now. It is unfortunately not the end of anti-Semitism on the university campus. And I hope through our conversation you have gained an appreciation of the fact that anti-Semitism for the Jew on the university campus, and in particular in medical education, and as I pointed out, medical education was really the only reason a Jew went to university until the 1700s, mid 1700s, has been an integral part of the Jewish experience throughout history. So thank you all for your participation in this evening's lecture. I'm actually, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer any questions. You can unmute yourself. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, and I will see if there's any questions in the chat.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
It's Jill Butler from way back from Montefiore. That in the Muslim countries, though, where the Jews did attend the universities there, were they allowed to study other topics besides medicine?
Thank you so much for pointing that out. So we did not discuss at all the Islamic history. Islamic history is quite a different history. There were golden periods where Jews were allowed to train. The truth is, it's more of a technicality, but the Arabic institutions weren't universities in the sense that we interpret universities. They were clearly educational institutions, but they weren't the forebearers of our modern universities. But the Jews, there was much more tolerance in, at least for periods of history of the Jews in Arabic education. Excuse me, and there were many Jewish physicians in the Arabic world as well. Now, whether they studied other subjects besides medicine, so a lot of these institutions were not universities in the sense that they offered multiple subjects. They were simply institutions that covered just medicine. So you would go to apprentice in an Islamic group of physicians that taught medicine and learned medicine and apprenticed medicine, etc. But they didn't have the same kind of university infrastructure with multiple different subjects, at least to the extent of my knowledge. So there's a question, how do you think these quota systems correlate with the efforts to diversify the student body, affirmative action, and now removal of affirmative action? So great question. So if you understand the history and you appreciate what they were faced with, it is not that I'm trying to be Malamed Zchus or defend the actions of those who instituted quotas, but if you're an institution, in New York City, which has a diverse group of people, and you end up accepting 60% of your student population is from the Jewish community, I could hear that that's not something that the institution would be happy with. I don't think it's inappropriate to take measures to try and diversify. So it is a tough question. It is a spectrum. From diversification to anti-Semitism, a line which I'm not so clear, so certain that there's a clear distinction between them, but I think it's all part of the same discussion nonetheless. So it looks like, unless anyone has other questions, I think we will wrap it up for this evening. Thank you all so much for joining, and I wish you all a meaningful fast on Sunday.